They told me the sea forgets, but I learned it remembers names, and mine sounded like a stone dropped down a well. I came back at night because daylight keeps promises the ocean never meant to keep. The harbor smelled of diesel and rot, of old rope and the faint metallic tang of blood carried on the tide. When I pushed off from the dock, my hands remembered the knots before my mouth remembered the words. I had the map my brother used to carry folded inside my jacket, a map with a stain the size of a coin where he'd pressed his thumb the last time we were together. The stain smelled faintly of salt and something sweeter, like the inside of a closed mouth. The first hour was ordinary. The hull creaked under me, the sails pebbled with salt, the sky a black so complete it swallowed sound. But ordinary has a way of lying by omission. The compass spun for a long moment, then settled toward nowhere. My radio hummed with static that sounded like breath. I told myself it was wind, gulls, the boat settling into the water. I told myself a dozen truths I no longer believed. Beneath the surface, the sea moved with a curiosity that was not movement but attention. It shifted as if listening for a name it had once loved. I remember the first sound that wasn't mine. It was a whisper threaded with foam, a syllable I couldn't place, a voice like a coin across the belly of a jar. I thought it was the echo of someone on a distant shore until it braided into the creak of my mast and the slap of my oar. It called, not once, but as the ocean calls a tide, patient and relentless. It said something that made the back of my neck tighten in a way anger never had. It said my brother's name. I stopped rowing. The water around the bow darkened as if a shadow had inhaled the moon. A smell rose, iron and old perfume, an impossible perfume that smelled like the inside of my brother's jacket when we were children, the one he wore the night he left. For a moment, I could see him, the way he laughed with his hands, the scar at his brow. Memory leaked out of me like damp from a shirt. I touched the map and felt, under my fingers, a seam where paper had been stitched to memory. Something tapped the keel, soft, deliberate, like a knuckle knocking at a door no one wanted to open. I thought of turning back, of crying out to the harbor lights and letting them swallow me whole. Instead, I reached for the oil lamp and fed it a little wick. The flame guttered, small and trembling, and when it lit the lantern, I saw a ripple cross the water that hadn't been there a breath before, an answer arriving like a mouth opening under the skin of the sea. The lantern threw a small circle of light that the sea treated like a wound, one it could probe and taste. The ripple that crossed the water resolved into shapes, dark folds that rose and fell like the throat of something sleeping just below the skin of the ocean. The knocking at the keel became a new language, soft at first, then urgent, until it sounded like someone drumming a finger along the ribs of my boat. I was no longer alone in the night. The water had invited company I could neither see nor refuse. Then the voices began to multiply. They weren't all my brothers. Some were fragments, a nursery rhyme my mother used to hum, the rhythm of a street vendor's call, a laugh that belonged to a girl I once kissed under a streetlight. The sea spoke in my past and in the pasts of everyone it had been near. It stitched those slices of life together and fed me them like bait. When a voice settled into the lantern's glow, it didn't just say a name, it told a story tied to that name, the small humiliations and private cruelties I thought I had buried. I heard, clear as bells, the sound of my own lies repeated back to me in a voice that knew the hair on my arms. The map in my jacket burned cold beneath my palm. The stain on it darkened like fresh ink, and I watched, helpless, as letters rose through the paper in a hand that wasn't mine. They spelled things I had not told anyone. The place I left a man to drown, the lie I used to keep my brother's money, the morning I promised to come back and didn't. Each confession, the sea coaxed from me, loosened another corner of my memory. At first, they were small things. The color of my brother's jacket, the name of the street where we fought, then larger, heavier things that made the world tilt, the sound of his laugh, the shape of his face, the reason he boarded that boat and never returned. When I tried to anchor myself to facts, the sea would hand me an image that fit the loss. My hands receding into water, my reflection folding into a grin not my own. The radio, which had been nothing but static, clicked and found a channel. My voice, my own voice, came out of the speaker, reading passages I had never spoken aloud, lines that confessed sins I had rehearsed only in the dark. Panic tasted like iron. I scrubbed my hands along my face and felt briefly the reassuring ridges of a scar I'd had since childhood. Then the scar smoothed like wax. Anxiety sharpened into terror when I realized the sea wasn't asking for truth. It was collecting ownership. It wanted to rewrite me. At one point, a shape rose, a mouth that was more suggestion than structure, a cavern of teeth suggested by ripples and foam. It breathed out a pressure that filled my chest and my ears popped as if I were descending into the deep. It offered nothing and everything at once, an exchange implied in the hush between waves. To keep what remained of my brother, I would have to give something else. To pry him loose from this patient hunger would mean losing the thing that made him mine. The choice was phantom and inevitable. Confession for a face, truth for a memory. I felt the first one slip through my fingers like a fish. The choice arrived like the tide, slow, inexorable, and utterly inevitable. The boat rocked as if some invisible hand had readjusted its center of gravity. The lantern light hung like a coin over a well. The mouth in the water was a suggestion of jaws and shadow, and from its throat came my brother's laugh, softer than I had heard it in life and thicker with salt. For the first time since I shoved off, I understood the exchange the sea wanted. A trade that had nothing to do with justice and everything to do with possession. It would give me a face to hold and tell me where he had gone, but it would take in return something I had been carrying my whole life. I thought of calling out the truth I'd been carrying in my chest, the full, terrible sentence I had avoided forming for years, but the sea had a way of arranging words before I could shape them. It unfurled memory across the water like a flag. I saw, with a clarity that made my stomach curdle, the night he left, the way his shoulders hunched, the way the moon slid off the gunwale, the hand I had not put out in time. The image slammed into me, immediate and undeniable. Confession tasted like copper on my tongue. I said the name of the place and the exact words I had never spoken, how I traded him for a chance to leave, how I told myself I would return. Saying it made my voice small and bright as a match. The sea listened. It folded that match into the lantern's light, and then, with a slow, compassionate hunger, it reached into me and plucked something I had never thought of as currency. Not money, not pride, but the scaffolding of myself. The names I used, the story I told about who I was. I felt them go first like teeth being pulled, one by one. My last childhood memory slid away in the space of a breath, the exact sound of my mother's humming. Then the scar at my brow smoothed. My hands stopped recognizing the rope. Panic came sharp and clean, but by then the trade was complete. The water exhaled and a face rose, not wholly formed, but present enough. My brother's features rearranged in the trembling surface, his mouth mouthing a story only the sea could translate. I reached for him, and my fingers closed on nothing but cold spray. He looked like salvation and like a lie. I wanted to speak his name, to anchor him to me, but when I opened my mouth, the sound that came was not a name at all. It was an echo, the geography of vowels with no owner. The boat drifted toward shore as dawn leaned over the horizon like a question. People would find the lamp and the map and tell each other a tidy story about a fisherman and a storm. They would point at the empty boat and whisper guesses. I would be there, maybe. I would be moving and breathing and unable to account for why the world fit me the way it did. My brother's face would be safe in my hands like a borrowed coin, and I would hold it and not know the name that had once tethered me. I said the truth to the sea. It gave me what I wanted and took the rest. I forgot my name.
Subscribe to Horror